All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dana Bear. I am the Director of Advancement at Mental Health America Lakeshore. For those of you that aren't familiar with Mental Health America Lakeshore, we are a mental health resource and education agency. We're located in Plymouth, Wisconsin, but we serve the entire county, Sheboygan County, and then some of the surrounding counties as well. And we've been here in the community for 70 years, and we have an information and assistance program, education and training, and as well as the community events and advocacy work that we do throughout the community and the state. So today we have Sarah Giencke with Reset Resiliency for a 30-minute webinar, about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. So please feel free to put questions in the chat throughout the webinar, and we'll address those all at the end during the Q&A time. So a little bit about Sarah. She is a nervous system and resilience coach who is certified in TRE, which is tension and trauma releasing exercises. She's the founder of Reset Resiliency, a wellness consultancy. Through her work, she helps people reclaim power and balance over their nervous system so that they can live less stressful and more peaceful lives. Having an intimate relationship to trauma, Sarah deeply understands the connection between the body's trauma response and adverse life effects, being easily triggered, hypervigilance, and experiencing chronic pain. Sarah places an emphasis on building safety with her clients while helping them gain self-agency and self-awareness. Welcome, Sarah, and I'm going to hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dana. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today, for setting some time aside to attend this webinar. You did such a great introduction. I don't even feel like I need to introduce myself. But here's a little agenda for today. So we're going to do some participation. I'd love for you, like Dana said, putting comments, questions, whatever in the chat. Let's load it up and really get a good conversation going here today. And then we're going to also talk a little bit of, not a little bit, a lot of it about some education, and then we'll go into solutions. And so this is our agenda. I hope that helps kind of settle you into your body and having you expect what's to come. So let's go ahead and check in with ourselves. We are coming from all different things throughout the day. So go ahead, grab your phone, scan that QR code, and let's check in. How are you feeling right now? Fine, calm. So you've got 2 people here. I think there's 11 on the call, 12 on the call. Tired, content. Hump day. Okay, here we go. Ooh, we've got a lot of calm, happy, settled, hungry. I feel that. Neutral. Give it about 30 more seconds or so for people to. Oh, someone else is squeaking in there. Interested. Too busy, hurried. I feel that. All right. Well, thank you everyone for chiming in with your thoughts on your internal weather system, what's going on internally. It's really important just to acknowledge what's in the room, what are we showing up with, and having some mindfulness and awareness around our bodies. I just want to say today we will be talking about trauma, so I just want to put that disclaimer out there. And so in light of that, I would love to know, what are your thoughts when you hear the word trauma? What comes to mind? What's your instant reaction? What kind of visceral reaction do you have to that word? Yes, I love to see the participation continuing. Hard things, anxiety and tension. Mental scars. Negative life-changing event. Something to overcome. These are really good answers. Dysregulation, mistrust. Okay, I think people have stopped typing, so I'll just move on from here. Thank you for sharing this. I really want us to kind of hold on to this as we move through today's presentation and see what shifts from this initial reaction. So how do we get to trauma? Well, we all know there's good stress and bad stress. That good stress is that stress. It's the stress that you feel when you wake up in the morning or you got to hit a deadline. It gets you out of bed, it puts that fire under your butt to complete things. However, there is a tipping point, as you can see here. When we start to move from eustress to distress, that bad stress, that's really what people think of when we think about stress. We start to move into exhaustion, anxiety, panic attacks, breakdown, and then complete burnout. However, I have extended this line because if our stress continues over a period of time, that's really where we're going to start to experience crisis or trauma, PTSD, big trauma, or chronic toxic stress, CPTSD. So it's important to know that we do need stress, but we also need to really have a meter on where our stress level is and where that's affecting us in our body. So 2/3 of US adults have experienced a traumatic childhood event. This really comes from ACEs. If you're not familiar with ACEs, ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Event. And there's a quiz you can take online if you just Google that. But it's pretty evident that 60% of us have experienced at least one childhood traumatic event. And so when we couple that with the fact that 1/3 of us have experienced post-traumatic symptoms as a result of the pandemic, add on other traumatic events such as the war that's happening right now in Ukraine between also Gaza and Israel, people are stressed and are experiencing trauma. And it's just not something that we're talking about as much. And it's something that I'm really passionate about changing that narrative and really normalizing it in our day-to-days. So for today's conversation, I would love to define trauma together. So when we say trauma, what are we meaning? Well, trauma is really a distressing or disturbing event that increases our lack of personal control. It leaves an impression on us. There's another definition as well that I provide here, and that's to say that it's any experience that overwhelms one's normal coping mechanisms and it leaves that person feeling hopeless or helpless. So if someone says that their life is divided in between a pre and post, just like we say pre and post pandemic, that's a really good indication that they have experienced trauma. And so for those of you who are trauma nerds, as myself, that's kind of a weird phrase. But anyways, I love the book, The Body Keeps the Score. This quote, it just really hits home for me. It's really stating that, trauma is not something that happened back then. It's the current imprint of that pain on that person's nervous system. It's them living in that horror or fear within themselves. It's not something that lives outside of the person. So when we talk about trauma, that is what we're really resting on today. Someone had mentioned earlier in one of the participation QR codes that trauma was life-threatening or something really big. And that is absolutely true. However, we do have two different types of trauma. We have big T trauma. So that is that life-threatening event that could look like neglect, food insecurity, war, death, divorce, abuse, natural disaster. However, we do have little T traumas, things that are not as life-threatening. They're smaller scale, more personal, distressing events that everyone goes through. So that could look like moving, loss of a job, or a breakup. Now, by no means is this list exhaustive. Trauma is subjective. What happens to us, it really depends on how we view things and how we have been raised to look at life. So there are many different types of traumas as well. We have cultural trauma, mass trauma, intergenerational, vicarious or secondary trauma, or also known as compassion fatigue. We have shock trauma, PTSD, developmental trauma, or childhood trauma, chronic, racial, relational, religious, medical, sexual, pre-birth and post or perinatal trauma, and social trauma. So I think when we think about trauma, a lot of people just think about that childhood trauma, but it's actually a broad, much broader stroke in terms of the types or flavors of trauma that we experience. So where does trauma really come from? Well, obviously it comes from our nervous system. It's that imprint within us. So the nervous system is very complex. It has many different branches, but the one that we're really going to focus on today is that autonomic nervous system, which is broken into the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So I love this chart here. It really lays out where our nervous systems live within our body. So our sympathetic lives right in this like middle section here of our body, and our parasympathetic lives in the brainstem and then all the way at the bottom of our lumbar spine. So, like I said before, the autonomic nervous system is really the foundation of our lived experiences. So if we grew up facing very traumatic experiences and we weren't equipped with the skills, we're going to see things as threats. Whereas maybe, on the other hand, we grew up and it did experience traumatic events and such. However, we were given some of the skills or the co-regulation that was needed to be able to push through and see the light on the other side and see not at things not as threats, but necessarily as opportunities. So let's take a look at the autonomic nervous system. So this is something called polyvagal theory. It was really invented by Dr. Stephen Spores. I'm definitely saying that wrong. But it was previously thought before this graph was created that we were either on or off. We were stressed or not stressed. However, through research, we have discovered that our nervous system has actually many different layers to it. And there's also even hybrid states, which I won't get into today. I just want to give a very easy foundational overview of polyvagal theory. And so this is really what the work that I do is based off of. So let's start at the bottom. Ventral vagal. That is a state where we really want to live. That's where we can feel safe, grounded, settled. We can be open, curious, ask questions. That's where we can be compassionate, be mindful, and live in the present. However, life is inherently traumatic. We're going to get triggered by things. And so when that does happen, we start to move up into a slight orientation to that threat or an alertness. And if that threat continues, then we're going to move into the fight or flight, which is really stemming from that sympathetic nervous system. And that can look like a variety of different behaviors or emotions. So the fight looks like rage, anger, irritation, frustration. And the flight looks like that panic, worry, fear, anxiety. I know that I tend to be a flighter. I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. So that response is very familiar to me in my body. And so if that threat continues, then we're going to move on up into freeze, which is somewhat of a hybrid state between the sympathetic and the dorsal vagal, which dorsal vagal is that complete shutdown or collapse. That's where you're going to see that a disassociation, depression, helplessness, just wanting to like isolate or disappear, having a higher pain tolerance. People may be suicidal. That's where shame is. People can feel trapped, confused, disoriented, and really just going through the motions of the day-to-day. So like I said before, this is where we want to live. However, a lot of people are living in these heightened states unknowingly, or living in these states for longer periods of time. And maybe they do dip down into social engagement at times, but it's really not their baseline. And so what I want to get across here is that our nervous system is very complex. And at the same time, none of these states are inherently bad. They have been adapted over time to keep us safe. For example, way back in the day when we were being chased by animals, a big bear, we would have this reaction to keep us safe. Either we would try to fight, flight, or freeze, or complete shut down. But what has happened over time is that we have then associated that same kind of physiological reaction to something that might not be a threat, but we're having that same internal impact, such as having high blood pressure. Your heart starts to race really fast, your pupils get dilated, you start to sweat or perspirate. These are all normal reactions, but we want to make sure that we're having those reactions when there is an actual threat, because the brain will have that reaction whether it's a true threat or perceived. So what I do with people, and I'll get into this a little bit, is help them come back down this chart and dip into social engagement, or that ventral vagal. So along with that graph, as I had mentioned before, when we live in these states over a heightened period, over a longer period of time, our baseline can kind of become that heightened state. And so this is a concept called window of tolerance. So just like we would go to the gym to work out and grow our muscle and build our muscle, we would do the same when it comes to resilience. So our window of tolerance can be really, really small if we're not doing any work to build that resilience. But as we do things that help us grow that muscle within us, so does our window grow. So hyperarousal is really where we're going to feel that fight or flight. And then the hypoarousal is really where you're going to feel that top layer that we looked at before. That's where you're going to feel numbed out, perhaps depressed, et cetera, et cetera. So the key here is really working on growing that muscle. And how do we do those things? Well, there's many different ways we can regulate our nervous system. Really anything that's in the mind-body area is going to start to tap into building a resilience, and also tapping into that vagus nerve, which lives in our parasympathetic nervous system. So some things that have helped me and clients that I have worked with, meditation, breathing exercises, physical exercise, emotional tapping, if people have ever done tapping like that, dancing, yoga, TRE, which we'll get into in a moment, Tai Chi, journaling, singing, taking naps, getting good sleep, and or timed with loved ones or pets. And I was actually reflecting the other day. I used to sing a lot in choir in college, and I was wondering, how did I get through all that time before I found TRE in terms of managing my stress? And I sang a lot, and so I had this aha moment where I was like, oh wow, maybe I need to get back to singing, because that singing or that humming taps into and touches that vagus nerve, which brings us back into that safety and calm and ease. So I would love to see in the chat, like, what ones have you been doing that have worked for you? I'd love to just start seeing that whole put in the chat. And I see we have another comment here. Fight, flight, freeze all the time. Ooh, interesting, Heather. So as we start to see some of those things come in the chat, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the specific modality that I work with clients and individuals on, which is TRE. And TRE stands for tension and trauma releasing exercises. So TRE is very akin to yoga and Tai Chi, meaning it helps move stuck energy that we hold on to within the body. So it consists of a series of exercises that release deep muscular patterns of stress, tension, anxiety, and trauma that we hold on to. It involves some light stretching, because tension inhibits shaking or tremoring, and then also some light fatiguing of muscles, so that you can then tap into this innate shaking modality, which, by the way, all mammals can do. It's something that us humans have suppressed or conditioned ourselves out of, really due to our prefrontal cortex labeling it as weird, weak, vulnerable, incapable, etc. Whatever label you throw on that, we completely suppress it and shut it down. And I have a couple tangible examples of that. But the first I want to start off with is your dogs. I don't know how many of you have dogs at home, but you may or may not have seen them shake over the 4th of July. And that is actually their nervous system's natural way of discharging that stress and anxiety and physical tension of the moment. That is their way of releasing that so that they can then come back to a state of calm. And so within humans, when we see that, like I said, we throw a label on it, such as if someone is speaking, that's a nerve-wracking thing for a lot of people. And so when we start to label people as X, Y, or Z, it can be really harmful because they're actually having a completely normal physiological response to the external environment. So I just wanted to say that on that piece. TRE is really based on the fundamental idea that's backed by research that stress, tension, trauma is not just psychological, it's also physical. Our mind, our body, and our spirit cannot be separated. So how does TRE work? Well, like I said, it moves that stuck energy and discharges it from the body. It helps us finish this stress response cycle that gets us back into that calm. So basically, let's start at the top here. Everything's all good. We're calm. We have an external trigger, which happens to us all the time on the daily. We have a specific response to it. One of the trauma responses, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which we didn't tap into really today. And then we are supposed to return back to calm, but a lot of people get stuck in that response state, which is what I was mentioning earlier on the polyvagal graph, how people are living in these heightened states. So essentially what happens through TRE is that when this energy gets discharged from the body then tells the brain you're safe to let go. The brain then knows, oh, it's not tight anymore. I can further let go. And it's this transcortical loop that happens within our body telling us and reinforcing that we can be safe. So what does TRE help with? Obviously, it helps lower stress and anxiety. It helps people decrease tension and chronic pain. It helps people come out of overwhelm and hypervigilance, helps people recover from burnout, helps them improve their sleep, decrease the reaction triggers by increasing that window of tolerance, improving your relationships, and also really increasing your overall resilience. So I did have a video I just wanted to show briefly here on what TRE is, what it looks like for one person. So the person, the sound's not being shared right now, but the person that is filming and kind of narrating through this experience is Dr. Berselli. He is the founder of TRE. He created this process, and he's really guiding this gentleman through the tremoring process, which can look like some shaking, some habitual movements that the body wants to do to release, but then there's also these stretches that happen. These, have you ever felt like, I really just my body just wants to move in this one way? That is what we're tapping into here. So as he's stretching, he's releasing tight muscles, and then you will see the stress, anxiety, tension, and trauma release in a light vibration or shaking. So. And as you can see, this is a pleasurable experience for him. He's smiling. It's feeling really good to him. It's something that our bodies, like I said, have suppressed and conditioned not to do. And so when we are starting to re-tap back into that and remember how this feels, it's such an opening and expansive experience. So I'll let it
There's one
play just for a little
question
bit.
in the chat,
Oh, yeah.
Amy put in, so we can actually shake it off, which I think is kind of a rhetorical question, but it sounds like that's true. We can shake it off.
Yes, Taylor Swift was absolutely right. We certainly can shake it off. That I feel like is my anthem. I love T Swift, and I also love to shake it off. Thank you for that. Thank you, Amy. Yes. I also see someone else put in there that they like to do yoga, meditation, breathing exercises. Yes. Those are all really great ways to manage our stress and anxiety. All right. So I went through that pretty speedy, but if you'd like to learn more, you can certainly scan the QR code here. This will take you to my website. I've also got my email on here. I've added a QR code as well for you to scan and fill out to receive copy of the slides. And then, of course, if you'd like to follow me on LinkedIn, you can certainly do that. I tend to post on there quite a bit. So now I think we're going to transition into about 15 minutes or so of Q&A. So what questions do people have?
And I'm gonna allow everybody to talk as well.
Great.
So just so you're all aware, I'm taking you off of the fully muted function. You can also type questions into the Q&A or chat. I have a question.
Yes, let's chat.
So when you have a client, how often, like, what does a typical client look like? How often are they kind of visiting with you and doing this practice? Is it dependent on different factors?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I work with clients over a period of time. So my goal is to reintroduce this to their body, get them to a place where they can self-regulate and really do this tool on their own, and then essentially have them be set free in terms of having this tool forever in their toolbox so that they can then rely on it as needed. Now, where people kind of enter in on that in terms of their TRE or tremoring process or journey really is dependent on their level of self-awareness, bodily attunement, if they've done other modalities or such. I always say I'd like people to try some other things first, like maybe some mindfulness, meditation, somatic experiencing, things like that, before coming to tremoring, because it is a weird thing. People have this internal battle when they're going through they can have this internal battle, I should say, when they're going through this process of, this is something I've been holding back my entire life, and now we are tapping back into it. So that's what I really do with people is I help coach them and guide them through this process, normalizing what's happening and really helping them and watch and nourish their tremor practice so that they can then do it every day if that feels good to them. I joke that everybody can tremor, but tremoring's not for everyone. So I highly recognize that there are different tools and modalities for different bodies. And I like to use a layered approach, kind of like a puzzle piece. Like, what are the pieces that work for you and your body that are going to kind of unlock some things for you? As that was the case for me with TRE, and really why I had to get certified and start bringing this to the masses. So thanks. I hope that answers your question, Dana.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Looks like there is a Q&A.
Yes, I see this.
Yeah.
Oh, Katie said, I enjoy EFT very much, and this modality seems to be more accepted these days, but I have found that TRE is a bit much in terms of working with professionals. I love it and found it helpful, but introducing it to others over the years, people have trouble being vulnerable with these kinds of experiences. Yes, it is definitely a vulnerable modality to use, and that's why I suggest trying some other things first so that we can when we come to TRE, we are ready to take that deeper dive. One thing that I really work on with clients is making sure that we're building a container of safety between myself and them. And sometimes that means not even starting with tremoring right away. Like, let's get to know each other and answer your questions so that you feel that at least cognitively you've bought in to doing this process. Your body might say something different, and that's when I would really slow us down. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Katie. And I love that you know it. Oh, yes, doing TRE in groups. Yes. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I see we have some other questions, but I'll tell a quick story. So I was actually introduced to TRE in a group setting as well, and I thought it was very interesting. And so I kept going because there was some kind of curiosity within me wanting to continue to learn this modality and try it. And I also really trusted my teacher, who then became my TRE trainer, which is just such a small world. And she's such a lovely human, Ellen McKenzie. Um, and so part of my process with groups is that I really want to try, or I really want to work with people one-on-one at first. I want to understand, is this something that your body might like or you might be attracted to doing or feeling safe to doing. And also just being really aware of what's going on internally for them and not just throwing them into a group right away. So I totally hear you. And Katie, if you would want to come off mute and talk a little bit about your experience, that would be great. And I think a really enriching conversation. All right. I see that we've got some other questions here as well. How long is normal to be stuck in the response phase, or is it dependent on the trauma? Ooh, that's a really good question. I think that depends on everybody's body. So let's just say we have a brand new human, a child. They haven't experienced any trauma. They do experience a trauma. Maybe they're heightened for a little bit, but then eventually they can come back down. But what happens if we have repeated adverse childhood events or ACEs over time? We're going to just start to live in these states and constantly be living in overwhelm or hypervigilance. And so that's where there's some actually very damaging physical things that can happen to our body when we're constantly secreting these stress hormones in our body and keeping us on all the time. That's why people struggle to sleep. They can't get to sleep. And so all of this helps them release that from the body and come back down into safety. Amy, let me know if that answers your question or if you have any follow-up questions there. We have another person asking, are there any other books you recommend about trauma? Yes, I have a couple. The Body Keeps the Score is a great book. The Revolutionary Trauma Release Process, I think I said that right. That is by Dr. Berselli. That's one book that I had to read for my program, but it was fabulous. And then there's another one that just came out with Dr. Stephen Spores, Seth and Stephen Spores, and that's called Our Polyvagal World. Something about how trauma impacts the body. I could look that title up for you really quick on my book list. I have to admit, I haven't read that yet, but it's definitely on my list to read. And that is called Our Polyvagal World, How Safety and Trauma Changes Us. Okay, we have another comment. In response to the person who was asking how long is a normal time frame, my body has been in that reactionary place for 33 years. My normal resting pulse is 140, and that's with lots of work. I think time frame can be different for everyone. Absolutely. Yep. Like I said, everybody's body is different and is going to react differently. Thank you for sharing that, Heather.
Katie also put into the chat, is it true that TRE doesn't have to just be used to release trauma, but day-to-day stressors as well? So it can be useful every day if we choose to practice it often.
Yes, yes. Also, thank you for putting Steven's name in there. Yes, just like we would, go to see our therapist when we're feeling good and bad, just like we would, go for a walk when we're feeling good or bad, we would want to also practice when we're feeling good and not so good. That continual practice is what's going to build that habit over time and really increase that window of tolerance. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. I was just on a talk last night with two other therapists, one who's DBT focused and one who is moving more towards somatics, and we had talked about that as well. So that's a very timely comment. Thanks, Katie. I love this so much. So many questions, so many interactions. Awesome. What other questions are people thinking about? Comments? When do we cut it off, Dana?
Well, if there are no more questions, we can wrap it up now. I would just say feel free to send any questions over to Sarah through LinkedIn if you want to connect with her, or if you have any questions for MHA, you can send them over to us at info@mhalakeshore.org. Again, this is recorded, so I'll be sending out the recording this week to all of the people that have registered, and then we'll post it on our YouTube channel as well. Thank you to everyone that joined us today.
Thank you so much for giving me more time back in your day.
Have a good day,
Bye now.
everyone. Bye.